And this is where the Israelites were, concerned about their loss with their fellowship with God, concerned that they had lost crops, but no real change. They had made something besides God their God. A real godly sorrow, there is always a change. And I stop before we read Judges 6, beginning in verse 11. When Peter had failed God so bad, and Jesus walked out of that upper room and he looked at Peter and he looked inside of Peter, it convicted Peter so bad. It says he went out and he wept. A lot of people believe that Peter went back to the Garden of Gethsemane, to where Jesus was arrested, and he fell down and he wept bitterly. We find out this is a godly sorrow because Peter's life changed. Never again did you find Peter denying Jesus. Did he make mistakes? Sure. But never again did you find him denying Jesus. Judges 6, beginning in verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat on the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior." Then Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all these miracles which your fathers has told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hands of Midian." The Lord looked at him and said, "Go in your strength and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you?" And he said to him, "O Lord, how shall I deliver Israel? My house, my family, is the least in the land of Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my household." But the Lord said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man." So Gideon said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who I am speaking with. Please do not depart from here until I come back to you and bring out my offering and lay it before you." And he said, "I will remain here until you return." This is where God is with the nation of Israel now. Yes, they have regretted, and they have regretted what they lost, and they want it restored, and they cried out. But you see nowhere where they were repenting of the idolatry that was going on in their life. And this is why God sent the prophet, to move them beyond regret into an actual change. But we need to understand, at this point, when the angel of the Lord sat down with Gideon, there is absolutely no evidence that there had been any change. Still, the angel of the Lord sat down with Gideon to raise him up to deliver his people. And I think what we see here is something about God himself. When the angel of the Lord was willing to sit down, and we see grace. We see grace that God is willing to move even before we are changing. And that's how you got saved. When you got saved, God began to deal in your life way before you probably made that profession of faith. And through people, through circumstances, through His Word. And that's what grace is all about. God's love for you in spite of who we are. Amen. And as I thought about that, I couldn't help but think about the woman that was dragged into the temple. And they threw her down on the floor of the temple. And with the stones, they were going to stone her. And then, "Jesus, what do you say do?" And He said, "You without sin, cast the first stone." They dropped the stones, they walked off, and then it says, Jesus bowed low. He bowed down to where this woman was. And He says, "Ma'am, where are your accusers?" And she said, "There are none." And He said, "Neither do I." Jesus was not making light of any kind of sin or whatever, but what He was saying is, "Lady, you are more important than what these people think. You're more important to me, and that is my grace. I am coming to you." And most people feel like when Jesus gave her the opportunity, that this woman actually made a profession of faith and accepted Christ. I also think quickly of the woman with the issue of blood. That as Jesus had no problem with that power flowing from His body to heal this lady, even though she was His last resort. And this is what I see with the nation of Israel. God reaching out with the grace and with the love, even though they had not made the change. And God is reaching out to these people, and God is reaching out to us, even though there are changes that need to be made in our lives. We see the love and we see the grace of God. We find Gideon hiding in fear in a cave in a wine press, wintering the wheat. And God is calling him in his weakness, though nobody has repented. I think I come across a story a while back. Rocky Chambers. Rocky said, I was one of these people that I could do anything I put my mind to. And he said, I did. He said, by the age of 29, I had accomplished all the goals I had set out for. I had a good paying job. I had a nice house, 2 cars, a wife, and 2 kids. I had obtained the American dream, and I was the most unhappiest person in the world. No matter what I did, I could not find happiness. And everything I tried to indulge myself in, I came up even more empty. And he was going to try harder, and he was going to try harder, and just problems I couldn't deal with. And finally one day, a gentleman in his office heard me complaining, and he invited me in. Rocky, come in. And he said he began to tell him what Jesus had done in his life. And he said, Rocky, what makes you feel worthwhile? And Rocky said, I didn't have an answer. And he said, the guy just quit talking to me. I got up and I left. And I thought about it, and I thought about it all day. And I came back to his office about quitting time. And he says, what does make you worthwhile? And the gentleman said, Rocky, you will never make yourself worthwhile. He said, only God can do that. And he shared with him the love of God again. And Rocky left. And he says, I determined that I was going to do better. I told my wife I was going to do better, and I was going to cut out my filthy mouth. And he said, the harder I tried, the worse it got. And the more difficult it was. But he said, the one thing that I never really realized, that during all of this time, God was working on me. God was preparing somebody to come to me. And he says, as things were getting so messed up, I really stuck my foot in my mouth. There was 2 gentlemen that I needed to talk to about work, and I walked and I saw them sitting over here talking. And I walked up to him in my brash manner. Don't you have anything to do? And when they did, I said, I heard a voice, and it was the top boss of the company sitting over here, and I didn't see him. And he said, yes, they have something to do. I'm sharing Jesus with them. And Rocky said, I went back to my office. The last person I wanted to see was Ken. And Ken came into my office and shared with me that he was the last person that he wanted to see too, was him. But he said, as I was trying to witness to these 2 guys, he said one of them mentioned to him, maybe it's Rocky that you need to be talking to. And so Ken began to talk to Rocky. And he began to share with him, are you ready to get your life right? And Ken said, Rocky said, yes. And he said, I was crying. And in my heart, I was crying out for God, and I didn't even know how to pray. And he said, Ken just got up and walked out. So all night, I tossed and turned in bed, just hoping and praying that somehow Ken would show up the next day, and here come Ken. Are you ready to get your heart right? And Rocky said, all I could do was cry and nod my head. And so Ken began to pray, and he said, I couldn't even repeat the words after him. And Ken said, just in your heart. And Rocky said, all I could do was say, I believe Jesus, I believe Jesus, I believe Jesus, I believe. And Ken got saved. And he said he realized that during all this time, Rocky got saved, that during all this time, God had been raising up Ken to share Jesus with him. So much as God raising up Gideon to bring salvation to the Israelites. God prepares his rescuer, and Jesus looks at him hiding in a cave, fearful. The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. Can you imagine Gideon hearing God himself, O valiant warrior? Didn't I say that I would be with you? And I need you to understand here for a minute. We get some things wrong, and I hear it quite often. God did not say, I will not put more on you than you can take. God said, I will be with you. God put more on Moses than he could take, so much to the point that Moses' father-in-law had to reach out to him and said, son, you're going to die if you don't do something. God put more on Joshua than he could take. It was more than he could handle. God put more on Job than what Job could take. So much so that he said, even though you destroy me, you're still God. And I want you to understand, God put more on Gideon than what he could take. And I look, and God puts more on you than what you can take. I understand that. And when people are quoting the Bible and saying, God won't put more on you than you can take, that is not biblical, folks. Amen. God does put more on you than you can take. And what God is saying, I am with you. Somehow I'm going to see you through this. And this is what we see in Gideon today. Amen. That God is using Gideon, and it's through the power of God for him to do what God is calling him to do. Gideon is not convinced. If you are with us, why has this happened? Now I can relate to Gideon. Lord, if you're with us, why is this happening? Where are all of the miracles that our fathers told us about delivering us from the hands of the Egyptians and bringing us freedom? Gideon even said, the Lord has abandoned us. My family is the very smallest, the very weakest family. And Lord, I myself am the youngest in my family. And when I thought about that, I thought about Jesus' family. I thought about God reaching out to just a young pagan girl and a lowly carpenter that had nothing. And said, I created you, and I know who you are, and I created you. Now I'm calling you to bring my son into the world and raise him. Through who you are and through my strength. Gideon was saying, no, Lord, what you need is another Moses. And God was saying, what I need is Gideon. I had recalled, I had gotten kind of involved in gymnastics of just enjoying it, and would watch it on the Olympics, and been to Auburn a few times to watch their gymnastic team. Just a really good thing. And I was thinking about, I thought about Kim Hamilton, and I remember years ago, Kim Hamilton in the Olympics. And so I Googled and looked up her story to try to remember it again. And her story goes is that my mother was always there to let me know that I was loved. But my father was a different story. Quite often he wouldn't even come home. Many times he missed Thanksgiving and Christmas. And she said, I was of no worth at all in his eyes. I had no value to him. So I tried. And she said, I can remember as a 6-year-old him teaching me how to roll his marijuana cigarettes. And then a little bit later, how to do the rock cocaine. And she says, I finally found out that there was something that could make value in my father's eyes as he looked at me. Seeking for my father's love. And she said, that's the only thing that I knew. But I was still searching for worth and self-value of myself.